Hello, everyone. My name is Mujtaba, and I welcome you all to KiwiTech's 808 workshop for startup and entrepreneurs to help them navigate the challenges of starting a business, making it sustainable, and taking it to the next level. Today, we have a mentor session on positioning your business for a global strategic exit by Kempton Schwab, Managing Director, STS Capital Partners. I'm super excited to introduce KiwiTech. We are an innovation ecosystem that's home to 500 plus portfolio startups and 300 plus mentors committed to supporting innovators globally. We team up with early to late stage startups to help them navigate through challenges and reach their next growth stage. Our startup program provides entrepreneurs with 360-degree support in terms of technology, fundraising, mentorship, and go-to-market strategy. Our founders have a successful entrepreneurial track record, having exited a publishing service company in 2012 after scaling it to over 5,000 employees globally. We have recently introduced a referral program at KiwiTech. This program rewards anyone who contributes to fruitful introductions to our company. Over the years, we have built this robust ecosystem of startups with the help of your trust and subsequent referrals. We realize it's time we give due credit to this trust through our referral program incentives. So if you know someone looking for tech development support to scale, join our referral program and follow the mentioned steps shown on your screen or visit our website www.kiwitech.com /referral program to learn more. Contribute to our growth journey and earn incentives for your trust in us. Without further ado, I would now like to invite Kempton Schwab, Managing Director, STS Capital Partners. The screen is all yours.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate all of my friends at Kiwi Tech for having me today. It's going to be a fun conversation. To do it virtually is a bit of a challenge. I'd love to do it in a live room so we could have more interaction and make it more conversational. But I'll present some information, open the floor for dialogue towards the end, and we'll hopefully have a chuckle along the way. My name is Kempton. I do work with an organization by the name of STS Capital Partners. We specialize in helping the owner entrepreneur at the very end of their journey, which is how to actually monetize their equity through a strategic exit on a global stage. My contact information is before you. I open myself up at any point in time to respond to emails or telephone calls and would be happy to answer any questions you may have independently after the presentation. I'm thankful for Kiwi Tech for having us here today, and we're going to have some fun, as I said, along the way. So please advance the slide. So these are the topics that we're going to discuss. And as I said, this is the journey, right? So most of you all on the call today are in the very first stages of owning and operating your business. And so we're going to talk through some of the things that are critical in the very beginning as we start, some of the things to be attentive to as you progress your entrepreneurial journey. And then we're going to end the discussion with how to position your business for an exit so that someone can take over the ownership of your business and catapult it to its next level of success. If we were in a large room and a group of people, I would ask the audience, how many organizations and how many companies do you think go through an exit? And having done this many times, I get a variety of answers. They can range from, 25% or 50%. And the reality, the actual answer to that is everyone does. It's 100% of businesses that start will go through an exit. Now, the question is, whether or not that exit is actually strategically handled and managed and proactively led, or whether it's reactive. Reactive things are things like bankruptcy, failing of the business, Proactive things are the things that you might see on the Wall Street Journal or something across the ticker on your internet, which says XYZ company sold to ABC organization for some absurd amount of money. And you look at that and go, man, how did they do that? And how can that happen to me? So what we want to talk about today is how to become one of those headlines, not one of those failures. Please go ahead and advance the slide. So again, if we were in a room, and I do this sometimes when I teach at a college level, I'll often get freshmen in a classroom setting to basically look at me and I'll say, okay, take out a piece of paper. And what I want you to do is I want you to write down and pass it to the front of the class what you would pay, the most you would pay per month to have your mobile communications device. So without this amount of money paid by month by you, you would no longer have it. But we need to know what that number is. And you'd be amazed at the range of which those numbers come in, from $100 a month to sometimes thousands of dollars a month. But what that isolates through that one exercise is for a young student to understand the value of that device to them is equal to the amount that they would pay. And that is the value delivered by that technical solution in their hands. Now, no one is thinking about the cost to actually manufacture that phone, the cost to distribute that phone, the cost to have service or applications on the phone at that time. They're only thinking about the value. So as you launch your businesses, I would advise every entrepreneur to not just think about the cost of the services and products that you offer and what it takes for you to deliver them, but be thinking about looking at those services and products from the lens of your customer and understand deeply the value that you provide to them and what it is worth in their eyes. So when you can combine the cost and the value and assure that the costs are lower than the value, then you can do that where you provide a solution, products or services with passion. It's something with which you hold near and dear to your heart. You will survive on your first stages of your entrepreneurial journey. So it's important as you launch and as you are getting started that you think about this value versus cost equation. And after you have thought through the passion that you have and how you're going to prosper, a lot of people talk about marketing their business or presenting their business, and they think about what people would refer to as the sexy areas of marketing, whether that is advertising, public relations, web presence, how I'm going to communicate my message. But the real work to do is the ugly marketing. It's not attractive. It's heavy lifting, but very valuable. And that is the strategic marketing of your business. And that is understanding the market that you are going to service and layering that market on top of the value versus cost equation you've already identified to ensure that there is enough of a market available that can generate revenues for you when you deliver your products and services to them, and you quantify that. So if you can imagine starting on the mobile phone solution, how many people in the United States buy mobile phones? What is the average amount of money they pay per phone? You're starting to get some quantitative marketing statistics on the market you're attempting to serve. That's important to layer on top of your passion and your value versus cost equation so that you can succeed. Determining the DNA of your business. So I'll just talk through this and the slide will catch up with me in a second. But when you think about the products and services you offer, what is very important is that you understand the competencies and components of the company that you have started and begun to operate, is understanding the competencies of your company. And so if you think about applying for a loan or going through a security clearance, they're going to get your name, your social security number, but they're also going to take a deeper dive. What do your banking records look like? What does your technological footprint look like? What do you actually reveal yourself as an individual? And from that, they might grant you a TSA pre-check, or they might grant you clear access to go through security, or they might grant you access to documents for the United States government, as an example. But what they do is they deeply understand the DNA of yourself as an individual and have a much broader look at the footprint of what you're doing. So in a product or service that you're offering, so let's say that you're in the t-shirt business and you have a manufacturer of a t-shirt and you are delivering quality ink that is not running on a t-shirt and you're selling it and it's manufactured in China and it's delivered in the United States. But underneath that are all the logistics and where your manufacturing costs are, your access to water, your access to shipping, your ability to clear through customs, all of those components that make you successful at selling a profitable t-shirt is the DNA of the business. And those underlying competencies are things you need to document along the way of your journey. And those themselves will reveal adjacent business development opportunities for you. So once you have a good feel, not just in the products and services you're offering and the value they're bringing to your consumer base, but also why you're bringing them forward and how you're successful in that, and diagnosing and documenting and diagramming all of those competencies, you can begin to look outward at how you expand to adjacencies to deliver, maybe not t-shirts in this example, but you might get into, oh my goodness, my market would really like to get shoes. And I have proven that my ink can survive through stitching in a shoe. And so therefore, there are so many people, because I've done my strategic marketing work, that are in need of these shoes. I'm going to go ahead and enter the shoe business because I have all of the competencies to grow beyond t-shirts and into shoes. And so as you develop your company, continuously document the competencies and skill sets you have, because they will pay dividends later on your journey. Please advance the slide to number 5. So as you grow in your existing business market, I came from a background of custom software development. And so when we would get really good at developing software around business process re-engineering and automation thereof, we would replicate those competencies with regard to actually consulting organizations on how to actually re-engineer their business processes before we would even automate them. And then we realized we were really good at actually creating and develop agile software solutions under disciplined program management practices. And so that yielded intellectual property that we could take and commercialize. So all of those things were inside of the DNA of the business I was once running, which allowed us to think beyond just delivering an application for a market to be successful. We were delivering competencies and capacities and layering the outputs as things that were for sale at the end. And so an example of that is, in a previous life, independent pharmacies would exist in local towns all over the United States. And in those small towns, whenever a Walgreens or a CVS would show up, they might have a mobile refill application available to them, but the local mom and pop pharmacy did not have that. And so no one mom and pop pharmacy could afford developing a mobile refill solution that would rest and succeed on both the Apple and Android marketplaces. But we as an organization could. And by doing the strategic market analysis, we could see that there were over 25,000 independent pharmacies across the United States. We realized that they could potentially buy and lease their applications from us for their mobile refill solutions at some rate per month. And we could sell to them a subscription to a customized database that would allow them to succeed and compete against the large retailers for very low cost points for them. And that allowed us to use competencies, technologies, and then layer strategic market analysis to then deliver a solution nationally. And it's the combination thereof of understanding what your DNA is as a business, not just what you're doing on day one to survive, but what you're able to do to thrive as a business in your competencies, which will allow you the positioning you need when you contemplate an exit. So let's go to the next slide. So now that you have a functioning, living, breathing company, you begin to think about this business and looking at it through the buyer's eyes versus your own eyes. I would advise any organization that feels like the current shareholders value the business the most and that they can do the most with it should not explore selling it. The real art is to understand what can your business look like inside of a different organization. So how does your operating entity fit inside of a different operating entity, and how can they leverage your competencies to potentially do more with what they have than what you could do yourselves? And at that point, the value of the business is more to them than it is to the existing shareholders. And that is the thesis that you want to begin to build so that you can craft proactively your exit. So an example of that might be that someone is doing manufacturing in China during the Trump administration and realizing that their capacities and expenses are going really high in production in China, coming into the United States and shipping into the country of the US and then prospering thereafter. However, another organization might have manufacturing footprint in Mexico, might be a party to the Maquiladora program, which allows them to ship unencumbered into the United States without all of the penalties that are there. And their products or services are of lower value than what is being generated in China. However, by moving that manufacturing operation into Mexico, the upside is much higher than what it would be in continuing operations in China. And therefore, that strategic thesis of acquiring that business in Mexico and the competencies that are there, regardless of what they're actually producing, creates strategic intrinsic value for the buyer, which is greater than what the seller can value their business at themselves. And when you can do that and understand the pro forma of the buyer, i.e. the integrated value thesis of extrapolating what you're doing into their operation and how they're going to generate revenue as well as margin in the future beyond what you could do yourself, that is what ultimately yields an exit that makes the headlines that have your heads turning going, how do I do that? It is the integrated value thesis that is generated off of the competencies that you all have built as your operating company on top of the value versus cost equation that you've already solved in a place in which you have passion. And when you can take that journey proactively to the end and hand your business off to a strategic operator, your exit will be far greater than the continued monetization of the performance of your company in your own ownership. So with that, I will stop and ask the audience for questions and apologize for the glitches in the first couple of slides.
Thank you, Captain. That was a great presentation. And for the audience, our mentor is ready for your questions. Please type them down in Q&A or chat. Let's give them 30 seconds to do so.
And will you deliver the questions to me when they come up? Because I don't know that I'll see them.
Right. I'll be asking those. Yeah.
Thank you.
So James is asking, do you have a recommended process for discovering our company DNA?
So James, the first thing that I would ask you is tell me what industry you're in, and then maybe we can respond from there. But I'll give you some generic actions, which is to document the process of what you do from A to Z. So clean energy software. So you're in the software development business, or you actually have developed software. So how did you actually develop that software, and to whom did you deliver it? And then what are the raw materials that you're doing? Is it human resources? Is it an individual? How are you replicating that software over and over again? And what is the result and how you're getting there? So once you understand the ingredients that go in to the actual solution you're delivering to your customer base and documenting all those ingredients, the competencies that allow you to dissect those ingredients will reveal themselves through that exercise. So beginning at the most infant, at the most minute level of detail of documenting your process from A to Z will reveal the best way to diagnose your DNA.
Thank you for answering that. We have our next question from Bobby, who wants to understand how do you strategically utilize brand building in licensing or exiting?
So brand building is obviously the ability to actually make your brand more attractive to a larger marketplace. And so what you want to do is understand the size. If it goes back to that strategic market analysis, understand the size of the market which are drawn to your brand. How many consumers are seeing that brand and relying upon that brand? And so by identifying the total number of addressable eyes that you have that get excited about your brand, you begin to then see inside of that total population what commonalities exist in their behavior patterns for purchase. And then making sure that your brand reinforces those commonalities over and over again, which will allow you to extrapolate and build a broader brand and strengthen it within that population base you're already serving.
I hope it has answered Bobby's question. So we have one more question from Upaji, who asks, how do you decide it is good time to exit by acquisition, or when do you finalize it is an IPO type of company?
Well, so if you think about an IPO versus a strategic exit, so let's just talk about those two examples of exits. For an IPO to be successful, you need to make sure that okay. So companies get measured often by their financial performance, and you'll see things that are in the public domain, like your price to earnings ratio, and that P/E ratio is what gets publicized. It might be 10 to 1 as an example. And so you can say, well, if we make $1, then it's worth $10 to the general public at that P/E ratio. To get the public to buy on to a future performance of the business at a high ratio, you have to convince the public that it has that strategic intrinsic value over a global large marketplace. To deliver a strategic exit, you just have to convince that of one buyer, the one entity that is going to acquire your competencies, integrate it into their operation, and they get all of the proceeds. So it is often a more narrowed focus to actually sell strategically than it is to go to an IPO. So it's going to be contingent upon who the primary beneficiaries are of your products or services as to whether or not those competencies fit better by publicly offering the stock versus a strategic value process into an organization that's going to buy you for the strategic reasons that you possess. When to do it? Proactive, not reactive. Most businesses, the lion's share, go through their exit because of a reactive circumstance: death, disease, disenfranchisement. My kids don't want to take over the company. They're not interested in it. Oh, we've had a terrible downturn. I've got to pay for adult health care. I got to have money. And all of those intrinsic factors come into someone's life, and that drives them to try to monetize their exit. And at that point, they're reacting to what's pressing them to create a vehicle of liquidity. And what you want to do is be thinking about proactively, how am I positioning my company? How am I reading the potential buyers of the operation that I've created? And when is the right time for them to catapult what I've done inside of their operation, and then proactively facilitate that exit into their hands, not wait for something to happen in your operation to end up in their hands.
Thank you for answering all the parts of that question. Bobby has another question where he asks, if you have proven sales around 1 million, but have been completely underfunded with little to no marketing dollars, how do you convince a larger partner to take a risk on marketing and distribution? Does great press help? What else?
Well, not knowing the personalities of the two partners. The first thing that I would recommend is if you have controlling interest in your business, ensure that you reduce distributions to only the bare minimum to cover your taxes so that you can reinvest into the company. But if you have a larger partner that has a controlling interest and you have to actually do the salesmanship work, then you have to build out the reasons and the thesis that the marketing investment today will return a financial result for them tomorrow to get them excited about releasing the purse strings. As far as utilizing the media, absolutely. To the extent that if you're in a local community, you can get local press to pick up on the things that you're doing and put it into their cycle of publication, or you can do industry branded work within the segment in which you're operating, and you can get published that way, and your message can get out that way. It can be reviewed and perceived as a subject matter expertise. Then, therefore, your level of exposure will grow, and so will the potential interest from your customers.
Bobby, I hope he's saying thank you for answering his question.
No problem. And Bobby, if you took my contact information down, I'm happy to chat with you afterwards.
Okay. She's a girl.
Happy to talk to any male or female or anything else of that matter at this day and age.
Even
The one thing that I
Apache.
want to make sure that I didn't mention in some of the slide hiccup was along the way of your journey, do your housekeeping. I cannot emphasize this enough. And what I mean by doing your housekeeping, what I'm talking about is document and protect your contractual agreements with your employees, your vendors, and your customers, because that's going to create the actual bones of your company that when you go to position it for an exit, someone's going to review. And what you don't want to do is have a shop that is not with every T crossed and every I dotted in your operation. A lot of young entrepreneurs get lazy on those aspects of their company, and I highly recommend do not miss the boat early on. Put in good discipline to monitor and track all of your arrangements across all of the stakeholders of your business, not just your operating partners, but also your customers, your employees, and your vendors.
Great, Campton. Even Apache is saying thanks. Your answer helps him.
Excellent.
So we have a few more questions, and let's begin with how does the current volatile, unpredictable financial markets affect the sales of actual companies?
So the first rule of thumb is strategically deal dynamics trump market conditions. And what I mean by that is if you think about just the most recent pandemic, you had some organizations that flourished tremendously during the pandemic, and you had other organizations that floundered. And so the quality of a company is more important. The competencies of a company is more important. Their understanding of the market they're serving, the value they're delivering, and how they're doing it successfully trumps all market conditions. Because if you believe in capitalism, which you obviously do as young entrepreneurs, then you're going to realize that progress is inevitable, innovation is everywhere, and ultimately what you're building, if you're doing it right, is going to be attractive to someone else. And so even though you might have headwinds with regard to the macroeconomic factors that you're facing, the reality is that deal dynamics trump market conditions. So you need to be aware of them, but think through them, not be reactive only to what you're facing in the market conditions.
Great. So another question that asks us about the difference between a financial and strategic buyer.
Okay. So a lot of people think about when they see transactions in the general public, they'll see that a company sold for some multiple of EBITDA. EBITDA being earnings before depreciation, income tax, and amortization. And so a multiple of that is obviously just the financial metric of that company. So someone that has $1 million in EBITDA that sells for $7 million sold at a 7 million multiple. That means that the person buying them is going to basically forego and bet that for the next 7 years, this business is only going to get better, or worst case scenario, it's not going to retract. Those people that are buying businesses that way are strictly thinking about it financially. And in that situation, you want to avoid those because, quite honestly, you're a financial operator as your own stakeholder and your own shareholder. So whatever you can do to influence the company today is the maximum amount of financial return you can get for it. And so you are a financial buyer of your own company every day that you continue to operate. The key is, as I said, that integrated thesis of taking that business that's making $1 million a year. And when you put it into another organization, that $1 million goes into, let's just pretend it goes into 7 million in 1 year, and they buy it for $14 million. To them, they have a 2-year return, but to you, you got a 14-year payout. That is the difference, and that's what you're seeking.
Thank you, Kempton, for such an elaborate answer. The next question is actually a follow-up question on the previous one, which asks, is there any way a private equity company acts like a strategic buyer?
Of course. So private equity businesses are where organizations obviously are using private monies to prosper by investing in business portfolios. And so whenever you have a solution that can be extrapolated across an entire portfolio of private equity investments in one fell swoop, then you can have a strategic outcome. So for example, let's pretend that you had a call center and you had the best call center in the world, and your call center solution was utilized by certain large players, and they really, really appreciated the quality of your call center. You protected the customer and you grew the retention by utilizing your call center. And a private equity business has 24 investments across organizations that have substandard call centers. Then by acquiring your business, putting it across their entire investment portfolio, they get 24 times the return than just that one call center solution in one organization in which they've invested. And therein lies a strategic multiple by a financial buyer.
Thank you, Kempton. Someone is asking if you could quote a couple of examples of an integrated value thesis you have witnessed.
So I think one that would come to mind is organizations that do business with governments is a really good example. So if you have customer retention in, let's just say, the state and local government business in the United States, and those organizations are very difficult to procure. So it's very difficult to get those contracts, but once you have them, they have long terms and long retention to them. There are other companies that want to get into providing services to government. And so one of the most easy theses you can see is by acquiring a business that already has those government contracts, you can immediately get that customer base, and then you can build upon it and grow your products and services into an already existing customer relationship. So one of the easiest investment theses you see is acquiring someone's customer base, that customer base pays more for other services. And so within one acquisition, I can get hundreds of customers versus having to go sell them individually. That would be one of the most logical and easiest strategic integrated theses people can see. You can also see that in operational procedures and operational efficiencies. If your construction is better than someone else, and they're building 10 times what you are, and you can take your processes and procedures and put it into their construction platforms, then you can get 10 times the results. And compared to what it would take for you to do that across all of that footprint would be far more difficult. So those are two examples that come to mind off the top of my head.
Thank you. And similar to Apache's question, Adam is asking, when should a company begin to shift from success in a business model to begin to think about the exit?
As soon as you have recurring ability to provide at least for the forthcoming quarter, meaning that you can see the light at the end of the tunnel and you can keep the lights on that you have to keep your engine running. You need to be thinking about where you're taking that train and who's going to value it the most, because it's going to do two things simultaneously. It's going to have you attentive to where the market is soft for you to be successful, and B, it will allow you to be positioned for someone to acquire your business to where it's more valuable to them. So as soon as feasible, you should begin thinking about who would value this business more than me.
Wonderful. For now, I have the last question, hoping for more questions to come. But let me
Sure.
ask this one. What are some of the other components that are important to buyers outside of the actual business?
So things that if you functionally break a company apart, you're going to see sales, marketing, research, you're going to see operations, you're going to see accounting, you're going to see finance, you're going to see customer service. And so if you start thinking about a business not just as a silo of generating profit with one or many multiple solutions, but thinking about it functionally, those functions where you can become best of breed at delivering in those functions can become strong components for the acquisition of your business. So, for example, Google made a name for themselves by creating a very relaxed and fun, innovative place to work. And so they did that for themselves. And you saw massive numbers of organizations follow that lead because they couldn't go buy Google's capacity in that regard. So they copied it. So if you think about things that you're doing inside of your business that instead of being copied can be sold, those are the things that have intrinsic integrated value into a new buyer that you can monetize through your exit.
Well, that were all questions, and you answered them very elaborately. I'm sure it was very enlightening, and it would help all the listeners with with the goals that they have for their startups.
Remember, you guys are the tip of the spear of the economy, the startup. I mean, it is the most exciting. It's the most exciting time in a young entrepreneur's life. It's fearful and it's rewarding all simultaneously. So, congratulations to each and every one of you on your starting this journey or where you are in your journey. And hopefully, one day it'll be big enough and sizable enough that it's going to be far more attractive to someone else, and you'll be able to be that headline we spoke of at the beginning of the presentation. And like I said, you can share my contact information, and I'm happy to communicate with you individually, offline, or help anyone along the way. Part of my reward of doing what I do is being a guide to folks that are on that journey, and how I can provide my experiences and direct relationships to help them. I'm happy to do so.
Thank you so much for being so open and available to help. With that,
I think we're ahead of time and we can give people time back, correct?
yes, we have some time left. I
I'll stick
would,
around.
okay. So, until a question pops up. Okay, James is asking for your email address.
Here we go. I'll put it in the chat.
Sure.
And please reference this presentation whenever you write to me so I know from where it came.
So yeah, keeping the current market conditions in mind, what do you think people should, a few things that they should keep in mind while planning for exit?
Well, I think if it goes back to what we talked about earlier, really documenting your process, procedures, competencies, and components of your business, and doing them in such a way that it anonymizes and can be applied elsewhere. I would advise any owner. It's a morbid exercise, but it's a really good exercise, and you can do it for yourself and you can do it for your business. And the exercise I used to have with my business partners a file, and we jokingly, I mean, it's a little morbid, like I said, we jokingly called the hit by the bus file. So that if I didn't come into my office and I was no longer there, there is a file that you can open, which will give you an instruction manual to do my job. And you can go hire someone of the capacity that I have as an individual leader, and quickly they can follow the instruction manual and they can succeed at some level in what I was doing before I got hit by the bus. So not only should you have that for you as an owner entrepreneur, for yourself and for your shareholders and for your families, you ought to have that on your business itself. And so your operations procedures manual, how you're doing what you're doing, documenting it fully, and then thinking about it in a generic way and where else it can apply is critical while we're in a dynamic market condition to track what you're doing and continuously improve upon it. The day that you finish documenting that is the day you start rewriting it, because it should always be a continuous process and project upon which you're working. It's an iterative process that never ends, both in what you do as an individual and what your organization does. And then always be reflective on where else you could apply those skill sets and competencies to find success, and do it in such a way, as I said earlier, by analyzing the markets and understanding how much opportunity is there that is yet to be fulfilled.
Okay. And I would be really interested to know that what type of mistakes do you usually see startups making who are planning for exit?
They overvalue the business themselves and they get emotionally tied to it. That is the number one. And the second thing is they see their neighbor or they see a peer that goes through an exit and they think they can do that, and they don't understand how it actually happened, and all they see is the headlines and they don't understand the deal terms. And the headlines always look good, the deal terms may not be so good. And so people start to count their chickens before they hatch, to use an old colloquialism. People begin to think and they get outside of operating their company successfully and they start thinking about the exit before they should. I tell every owner that is going through the process, you need to act as if this transaction will never conclude, because anything that happens only happens at the very end, and you need to operate the business as if it's not for sale every day that you have it.
Uh-huh. So we have another question from James. I think it's his first question other than asking your email address. So he's
Sure.
asking, is our last fundraising valuation relevant to a potential buyer?
No. And I will say that and give you a little bit of an elaboration. Every buyer is going to analyze it for themselves. What you're putting forward whenever you think about raising money is you're putting a valuation for an investor. That is for that investor. It might give you some order of magnitude that someone might personally put money into it, but it is not taking into consideration what that organization that would acquire it would do with it. And so they're going to look at that with a grain of salt, and they're going to always be thinking about, why would I buy this? What does it mean to my shareholders? And how can I extrapolate maximum value for it? And that will be the value they put on it.
I hope that answers your question, James. Bobby is back with another interesting question. Kempton, do you have resources, or can you point people in the right direction to help a startup find the right larger companies, executives to speak about licensing or exiting to them?
Licensing or what?
Exiting.
Well, I would gladly talk about exiting, because that's what I do. As far as licensing, I know a couple of people. If you just write to me offline, I'll connect you to some folks that are in the licensing business.
Right. So, Bobby, Kempton has mentioned his email address on the chat. You may reach out to him there and give the reference of this presentation.
Yes, absolutely.
And with so much experience in exiting, what do you think is the most challenging part to be cracked while planning for something like that?
A couple things that are really challenging. One is authentic understanding of the owner's desires of the existing company. What I mean by that is, do you really and are you emotionally ready to sell your company? The first part of any relationship that I have is almost therapeutic in nature, which is let's understand why you're doing this, and we have to get to the root cause of your desire for the transaction and why it's the right time, and really having that transparent discussion about why that is and making it make sense is often difficult. And in any instance where there are multiple shareholders, getting them to align themselves is the next most difficult thing to do. Is because if you and I are in business together and I think the company's worth $50 million and you think it's worth $5 million and we get an offer for 25, what are we going to do? We're not aligned. And so getting to the emotional components associated with going through letting go of something you poured your blood, sweat, and tears to, and understanding why it's the right time to do it, and then alignment amongst shareholders is often very difficult when you begin the exit process. The business will take care of itself, and quickly you can see what the competencies are and who would value it the most, and you can pretty much get there through logic, but it's very difficult to get through the emotional part logically.
Uh, so what is the one thought that founders should constantly keep in mind while going through different stages of exit that they should stick to and not forget?
Operate the company as if you're not selling it. Wake up in the morning and do what you've got to do that's in the best interest of the business today. And if the transaction occurs, great. But the failure occurs when people start thinking they've sold their business before it's actually happened. And then they have disenfranchised themselves with the company, and the quality of the organization will go down, which got
Uh,
them into the position for an exit in the first place.
okay. I hope we have all answered all the questions that we received. That would be it for today's session. If anyone has any more questions, you can reach out to Kenton on his email, and he would be happy to reply, well, given that you give him the reference of this presentation.
Absolutely. Happy to help or
Right.
point you in the direction of anyone that I know that can help you. I appreciate the time, guys. You know, it's a fun world to live in, and congratulations again. There's no 2 days are the same whenever you're owning and operating a company.
Right. So, like Kempton said, while you're doing everything that you're doing for your startup, don't forget to have some fun. Oh, Bobby is saying you're awesome. Really appreciated this. Thanks. I agree. Kempton is
Well,
just
thank you.
more than awesome.
Well, I'm glad to do it. And like I said, anytime, I've enjoyed working with you all in the past, and it's a fun topic to be a part of. And not a lot of people get to go through the exit journey. And so it's nice to share the experiences that I've had with folks that are interested in it.
Uh-huh. So I would like to take it over from here now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. With that, I would like to thank our mentor, Kempton, and all our guests for joining us today, plus our team for making this learning experience possible. We'll be back with more workshops. I would like to bring your attention back on the screen for our upcoming events. We host events on weekly basis. We hope to see you again at some of our other virtual events. Till then, take care and stay safe. Thank you and wishing you an amazing day ahead.